A ruthless Comanche warrior, a vulnerable child, and a woman whose kindness defies all expectations. What happens when fear collides with compassion in the Wild West? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Willow Creek, a small frontier town nestled between rolling plains and distant mountains. The year was 1875, and the uneasy peace between settlers and Native American tribes remained fragile, especially with the Comanche, whose fierce reputation had earned them both fear and respect across the territory. Sarah Jenkins stood behind the counter of her modest general store, arranging merchandise with meticulous care. At 32, she was considered a spinster by most townsfolk, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her husband Thomas had been killed 3 years earlier in a raid, leaving her alone to manage both her grief and the business they had built together. "Miss Sarah, got any more of that peppermint candy?" young Billy Thompson asked, his freckled face pressed against the glass jar that now stood empty. "I'm expecting a shipment next week, Billy. I'll set some aside for you," Sarah replied with a gentle smile, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. The store bell jangled as Sheriff Miller pushed through the door, his weathered face grim beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "Morning, Sarah. Just wanted to let you know there's word of Comanche spotted about 10 miles east of town." Sarah's hands stilled on the bolts of fabric she'd been organizing. "Raiding party? Don't rightly know. Could be just passing through. But folks should stay alert." He adjusted his gun belt. "Thought you'd want to know, considering—" He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Everyone knew about Thomas. "Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate the warning." After the sheriff left, Sarah found herself staring out the window, memories flooding back unbidden. The screams, the flames, the crushing weight of loss that followed. She shook her head, forcing herself back to the present. Later that afternoon, as Sarah was preparing to close the store, the bell jangled again. A tall Native American man stood in the doorway, his presence filling the small shop. Unlike others she'd seen, he wore a curious blend of traditional Comanche clothing and elements of settler garb, buckskin pants paired with a white man's shirt. His long black hair was tied back, and his dark eyes surveyed the store with unsettling intensity. Behind him, partially hidden, was a small boy of perhaps 5 or 6 years. The child's features suggested mixed heritage, Comanche and white. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward the shotgun she kept beneath the counter. "We need supplies," the man said in surprisingly good English, though heavily accented. "We pay." He held up several silver coins. "We're closing," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The man studied her for a long moment. "My son needs food, medicine." He gestured to the boy, who looked up with feverish eyes. "No one else will trade with us." Something in the child's gaze made Sarah hesitate. Despite her fear, the shopkeeper in her noted the boy's flushed cheeks and labored breathing. "What's wrong with him?" she asked cautiously. "Fever, 3 days now." Sarah glanced between them, conflict evident on her face. Finally, she sighed and moved toward her medicinal supplies. "What's your name?" she asked, selecting a bottle of fever remedy. "I am called Swift Arrow by my people. Some whites call me Samuel." He placed a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "This is Little Fox, my son." "And his mother?" A shadow passed over Swift Arrow's face. "Gone. 2 winters now." Sarah measured out the medicine, explaining how to administer it. As Swift Arrow reached for it, their fingers briefly touched, and Sarah was surprised by the unexpected jolt that ran through her. "Town won't like that you came to me," she said, gathering additional supplies she thought they might need. "Town does not like us anyway," he replied simply. "But I remember you. Your eyes are kind, even now when you are afraid." "You remember me? From where?" Swift Arrow didn't answer directly. "We will go now. Thank you for the medicine." He placed more coins on the counter than necessary. As they turned to leave, Little Fox stumbled slightly. Without thinking, Sarah moved forward to steady him, kneeling to his level. "You'll feel better soon," she told him gently. The boy looked at her with curious eyes. "Are you a medicine woman?" he asked in halting English. "No, just a shopkeeper who knows a few remedies." Swift Arrow watched this interaction with an unreadable expression. "We must return before dark," he finally said, ushering his son toward the door. As they departed, Sarah found herself standing in the doorway long after they'd disappeared from sight, wondering about the curious pair and why Swift Arrow claimed to remember her. Most troubling was the realization that despite everything that had happened, despite all she had lost, she felt a strange pull to help them, especially the boy. Little did she know that this encounter would be the first of many, each one drawing her deeper into a world she never expected to enter, and closer to a man she had every reason to fear. 2 weeks passed before Sarah saw Swift Arrow and Little Fox again. Rumors had swirled through town about Comanche sightings, but there had been no raids or trouble. Still, Sarah found herself watching the road more often than usual, wondering about the fate of the feverish child. The second meeting came unexpectedly. Sarah was returning from delivering supplies to the widow Carson, who lived on the outskirts of town, when she spotted them, Swift Arrow and Little Fox, camped beside the creek that gave the town its name. Their small fire sent tendrils of smoke curling into the late afternoon sky. Prudence dictated that she continue on her way, but concern for the boy won out. She guided her horse off the trail toward their camp. Swift Arrow rose to his feet as she approached, his expression guarded but not hostile. Little Fox, who had been playing with stones by the creek, looked up and smiled shyly. "The medicine woman," he said, rising to his feet. Sarah dismounted, keeping a cautious distance. "I'm not a medicine woman, remember? Just Sarah. How is your fever, Little Fox?" "Gone," Swift Arrow answered for him. "Your medicine helped. We are grateful." Sarah nodded, surveying their simple camp. "You're staying close to town. Isn't that dangerous for you?" Swift Arrow's gaze was steady. "More dangerous elsewhere. Soldiers to the north, other tribes to the south who would kill us." "Kill you? Why?" He gestured to Little Fox. "My son is half white. My band rejected us after my wife died. They say he weakens our bloodline." Bitterness edged his words. "White men hate us because we are Comanche. We belong nowhere." The raw honesty surprised Sarah. "And the boy's mother? She was white?" Swift Arrow nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Rebecca, settler woman taken in raid 5 winters past. She became my wife." "Taken?" Sarah couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "You mean kidnapped?" "At first, yes." He did not shy from her accusation. "Later, she chose to stay. She loved Little Fox." Sarah looked at the boy, who was now showing her a small wooden horse he'd been carving. The craftsmanship was remarkable for one so young. "That's beautiful work," she told him, momentarily setting aside her complicated feelings about Swift Arrow's revelation. "Father teaches me," Little Fox replied proudly. Swift Arrow watched them interact, something unreadable passing across his features. "We need more supplies," he said abruptly, "but cannot go to town again so soon." Sarah understood the implicit request. Despite her better judgment, she heard herself say, "Tell me what you need. I can bring it tomorrow." Later that evening, as Sarah sat alone in her quarters above the store, she questioned her own sanity. Helping Comanche, especially after what had happened to Thomas, would be seen as nothing short of betrayal by most in town. Yet the memory of Little Fox's innocent face kept intruding on her doubts. True to her word, Sarah returned the next day with supplies. She found Swift Arrow teaching his son to fish with a handmade spear, their movements fluid and practiced. For a moment she simply watched them, struck by the tenderness the warrior showed his child, so at odds with the tales of Comanche brutality she'd grown up hearing. Over the next several weeks, Sarah found reasons to visit their camp regularly, bringing food, clothes for Little Fox, and news of town. Each time she told herself it would be the last, yet she kept returning. Swift Arrow remained somewhat inscrutable, but Little Fox blossomed under her attention, eagerly showing her the skills his father taught him, and listening raptly to the stories she brought from her small collection of books. During one such visit, as Little Fox napped nearby, Swift Arrow finally spoke of what had been unspoken between them. "You lost someone to my people. It wasn't a question." Sarah stiffened. "My husband. 3 years ago." Swift Arrow nodded slowly. "I know. I was there." The words hit her like a physical blow. "You... what?" "I was there," he repeated, meeting her gaze steadily. "Not as a warrior. I came after, looking for survivors. I saw you being pulled from the burning store. You were unconscious, I remember thinking your hair looked like fire itself. Sarah's mind reeled with this revelation, memories of that terrible night flooding back. The raid, the flames, Thomas pushing her toward the back door moments before the roof collapsed. She had been pulled free by neighbors, but Thomas had not made it out. "Why are you telling me this now?" she whispered, hands trembling. "Because you need to know I am not your enemy." His dark eyes held hers. "My band did not conduct that raid, but I knew then, watching you, that our people's ways must change. When I met Rebecca later, I began to understand another path." Sarah didn't know what to believe. Part of her wanted to flee, never to return. Yet something in his steady gaze kept her rooted to the spot. "Little Fox needs more than I can give him," Swift Arrow continued. "He needs to know both worlds, his mother's and mine." "What are you asking of me?" Sarah questioned, though she feared she already knew. Before he could answer, shouting erupted from the direction of the road. Sheriff Miller's voice carried clearly. "Jenkins! Sarah Jenkins! You out here?" Swift Arrow moved with startling speed, gathering their few belongings. "Take the boy," he said urgently, guiding a sleepy little fox toward her. "What? I can't—" "They will not harm you, but they will kill me. And then what becomes of my son?" His voice was low but intense. "Just until I can return, please." Sarah looked from Swift Arrow to Little Fox, who was now fully awake and frightened. The voices were growing closer. "2 days," she whispered urgently. "The old Carson place is abandoned. Meet us there." Swift Arrow nodded once, touched his son's head briefly, then disappeared into the underbrush with silent grace, just as Sheriff Miller and 3 other men broke into the clearing. "Sarah Jenkins, what in God's name are you doing out here with—" The sheriff stopped short, seeing Little Fox clinging to her skirts. "That's a Comanche child." Sarah drew herself up, mind racing. "Yes, I'm taking him to town. His father is dead." The lie burned her throat, but she forced herself to continue. "The boy needs proper care." Sheriff Miller's suspicious gaze swept the clearing. "And just how did you come across this child?" "I found him while gathering herbs. His camp had been abandoned." She met his eyes steadily. "Would you have me leave a child alone in the wilderness, Sheriff?" The men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Whatever their feelings about the Comanche, none wanted to advocate abandoning a young child. "This won't sit well with some folks," Miller warned. "Then they needn't sit with it at all," Sarah replied, lifting Little Fox into her arms. "Now, if you'll excuse me, this boy needs feeding and a proper bed." As she rode back to town, Little Fox silent and wide-eyed before her on the saddle, Sarah wondered what madness had possessed her. She had just lied to the sheriff, taken in a Comanche child, and arranged a secret meeting with a warrior who had been present at the raid that killed her husband. Yet looking down at Little Fox's frightened face, she felt an unexpected certainty that she had done the right thing. What came next, however, remained terrifyingly unclear. Word spread quickly through Willow Creek. By nightfall, it seemed everyone knew that Sarah Jenkins had brought a Comanche child into town. Reactions ranged from outright hostility to reluctant acceptance, with most falling somewhere in between, uncomfortable but unwilling to directly challenge Sarah, whose quiet dignity had earned her respect over the years. Sarah converted a storage room behind her shop into a temporary bedroom for Little Fox. The boy remained mostly silent, watching her with solemn eyes as she arranged blankets and a small pillow on a narrow cot. "You'll be safe here," she assured him, lighting a small lamp. "Are you hungry?" Little Fox nodded hesitantly. "Where is my father?" Sarah knelt to his level. "He had to go away for a little while, but he'll come back for you. I promise to keep you safe until then." "The men with guns will hurt him," Little Fox said, his young face grave with understanding beyond his years. "Your father is very clever and very fast," Sarah replied, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. "Now, let me get you something to eat." Later that evening, as Sarah was closing the shop, Martha Wilson, the preacher's wife, appeared at her door with a covered dish and a pinched expression. "I've brought stew," she announced without preamble. "I imagine you've had quite the day." "Thank you, Martha, that's very kind." Sarah accepted the dish, recognizing the offering as both goodwill and an excuse to satisfy curiosity. Martha glanced around the shop. "Where is the child?" "Resting. He's exhausted and frightened." Martha lowered her voice. Sarah, what on earth possessed you to bring a Comanche child into town? After what happened to Thomas? Sarah had prepared for this question. He's an innocent child, Martha. Would Christ have me leave him to die in the wilderness? The mention of Christian duty made Martha shift uncomfortably. Well, no, but what do you plan to do with him? Care for him until proper arrangements can be made, Sarah replied vaguely. Now, thank you for the stew. I should check on him. After Martha left, Sarah locked the door firmly and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. One visitor down, undoubtedly more to come. In the makeshift bedroom, she found little Fox examining her late husband's pocket watch, which she'd left on a small table. That was my husband's, she said softly. Little Fox carefully placed it back. The man who died? Yes. She sat beside him on the cot. His name was Thomas. My mother died too, Little Fox offered, his small face serious. Father says she watches us from the star roads. Sarah's throat tightened unexpectedly. That's a beautiful thought. Do you think your Thomas and my mother know each other there? The innocent question caught Sarah off guard. I don't know. Perhaps they do. Little Fox seemed satisfied with this possibility. He ate the stew Sarah offered, then allowed her to tuck him into bed. As she turned to leave, his small voice stopped her. Will you tell me a story? Mother always told stories. Sarah returned to sit beside him. What kind of stories did she tell? Stories of her people, of cities and trains and books. So Sarah told him about cities she'd never seen but had read about, New York and Boston and San Francisco. She described trains that crossed the country and ships that sailed the oceans. Little Fox listened raptly until sleep finally claimed him. The next day brought more visitors to the store, some openly hostile, others merely curious. Sheriff Miller returned mid-morning, found tracks around that camp, he reported, eyeing Little Fox, who was quietly drawing with charcoal on paper Sarah had given him. More than just the boy. Adult Comanche, likely male. Sarah busied herself with inventory. I told you the camp was abandoned. Perhaps those tracks were old. They weren't. Miller's gaze was shrewd. Sarah, if you're mixed up in something dangerous, I'm caring for an orphaned child, Sheriff, nothing more. She met his eyes steadily. Unless you've come to take him from me. Miller sighed. No, but I'll be watching, for your own safety. By afternoon, Sarah had weathered numerous similar conversations. Little Fox remained quiet through it all, staying close to her side, his dark eyes observing everything with remarkable composure for one so young. As evening approached, Sarah faced her most difficult challenge yet. Robert Ferguson, whose brother had been killed in the same raid that took Thomas, entered the store just before closing. His face was flushed with anger and likely whiskey. So it's true, he spat, glaring at Little Fox. You're harboring one of them. Sarah stepped protectively in front of the boy. He's a child, Robert. Just a child. He's Comanche. Same savages that killed Thomas. Killed my brother. Ferguson's voice rose. And you bring him into our town? I understand your pain. You understand nothing. Ferguson slammed his fist on the counter, making Little Fox flinch. If you had any respect for Thomas's memory, don't you dare, Sarah interrupted, her voice suddenly hard. Don't you dare use my husband to justify cruelty toward a child. Ferguson's face darkened further. The only good Indian is a... That's enough, Ferguson. Sheriff Miller's voice cut through the tension as he stepped through the door. Time for you to head home. For a moment, Ferguson seemed ready to argue, but something in Miller's stance made him reconsider. With a final venomous look at Sarah and Little Fox, he stormed out. Thank you, Sarah said quietly after he'd gone. Miller nodded. Don't thank me yet. Sentiment's running high against you, Sarah. I can't be everywhere. After he left, Sarah closed the shop early. That night, she slept fitfully in a chair beside Little Fox's cot, a loaded shotgun across her lap. The following day, the day Swift Arrow was due to meet them at the abandoned Carson place, passed with excruciating slowness. Sarah kept the store open as usual, ignoring whispers and stares, while making quiet preparations to slip away after closing. As twilight approached, Sarah loaded minimal supplies onto her horse and helped Little Fox mount up. They left through the back alley, hoping to avoid notice. Sarah had chosen a roundabout route to the Carson place, one that would be harder to track if anyone saw them leaving town. Will Father be there? Little Fox asked as they rode. I hope so, Sarah replied honestly. The old Carson homestead came into view just as darkness was falling in earnest. The abandoned cabin stood dark and silent, its windows gaping like empty eye sockets. No smoke rose from the chimney. No light shone from within. Sarah's heart sank. Had Swift Arrow abandoned them? Or worse, had he been captured or killed? She helped Little Fox dismount and cautiously approached the cabin, lantern held high. Hello? Is anyone here? The silence stretched, broken only by the creak of the wind through the damaged roof. Little Fox pressed against her skirts, suddenly fearful. He's not coming, the boy whispered. Before Sarah could respond, a shadow detached itself from the darkness beside the cabin. Swift Arrow stepped into the circle of lantern light, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. You came, he said simply. Relief washed through Sarah, surprising her with its intensity. I said I would. Little Fox ran to his father, who lifted him in a rare display of open affection. They spoke briefly in Comanche, the boy's excited voice contrasting with his father's deeper tones. When Swift Arrow set his son down, he turned to Sarah. Thank you for protecting him. It wasn't easy, she admitted. The town is divided about him, about me helping him. Swift Arrow nodded, unsurprised. It will be worse now. You should not return. What do you mean? Sarah asked, confused. Ferguson and others. They follow you. Swift Arrow's expression darkened. They watch from the ridge even now. Sarah turned sharply, peering into the darkness beyond the lantern's glow. How do you know? I have watched since sundown. Saw them tracking you. He moved closer, urgency in his voice. They come for the boy, for me. The implications hit Sarah with stunning force. She had led Ferguson directly to Swift Arrow and Little Fox. Her attempt at secrecy had failed completely. We have to leave, she said, her mind racing. All of us, now. Swift Arrow shook his head. Too late for that. As if confirming his words, distant voices carried on the night air, accompanied by the approaching thud of hoofbeats. Inside, Swift Arrow commanded, ushering them toward the cabin. There is another way out. The abandoned cabin was bare except for a few broken pieces of furniture. Swift Arrow moved swiftly to the back wall, where he showed them a section of flooring that had been loosened. It leads to a root cellar. There is a tunnel the old man dug during Apache raids. He looked at Sarah intently. Take Little Fox. Head east through the tunnel. Follow the stream beyond until you reach the split oak. Wait for me there. What about you? Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. I will lead them away. His expression was resolute. Give you time. Outside, the voices were growing closer. Sarah recognized Ferguson's angry tones among them. I can't let you sacrifice yourself, she protested. Swift Arrow's expression softened momentarily. I am not sacrificing. I am protecting what matters most. He knelt before Little Fox, speaking rapidly in Comanche, then in English. Go with Sarah. Be brave. I will find you. Little Fox nodded solemnly, though tears shone in his eyes. Swift Arrow rose, facing Sarah once more. In a swift, unexpected movement, he reached out to touch her cheek. You have a good heart, Sarah Jenkins. Better than I deserve. Before she could respond, he was gone, slipping out through a broken window at the side of the cabin. Sarah barely had time to help Little Fox through the hidden trapdoor before the cabin door burst open. She heard Swift Arrow's war cry from somewhere outside, drawing attention away from the cabin. Gunshots followed, then shouts of pursuit. Heart pounding, Sarah lowered herself into the dark space beneath the floor, pulling the trapdoor closed above them. Little Fox's small hand found hers in the darkness, holding tight as they began their desperate journey through the tunnel, away from the violence erupting above ground. As they crawled through the narrow passage, Sarah prayed for Swift Arrow's safety, surprising herself with the fervor of her concern for a man who represented everything she had once feared and hated. Somehow, in the span of mere weeks, her world had been turned completely upside down, and there was no going back to the way things had been before. The tunnel was damp and narrow, forcing Sarah to crawl on hands and knees. Little Fox moved ahead of her, his smaller frame navigating the space more easily. Neither spoke as they made their way through the darkness, guided only by occasional cracks in the earthen ceiling that allowed slivers of moonlight to penetrate. Above, the sounds of pursuit had faded, either because the men had followed Swift Arrow away from the cabin, or because the thick earth muffled their voices. Sarah hoped desperately for the former. After what seemed an eternity, Little Fox whispered, "I see light." The tunnel ended at a crude wooden door, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. Sarah pushed it open cautiously, scanning the area before helping Little Fox out. They emerged near a small stream, just as Swift Arrow had described. "We need to follow the water," Sarah told the boy, her voice hushed, "until we find a split oak tree." Little Fox nodded, his young face unnaturally solemn. "Father will come," he said with simple certainty. Sarah wished she shared his confidence. The memory of gunshots echoed in her mind as they made their way along the stream bank, moving as quietly as possible through the moonlit landscape. They found the split oak after nearly an hour of careful progress, an ancient tree whose trunk had been cleaved by lightning, yet had somehow continued to live, both halves growing outward in a wide V shape. Sarah guided Little Fox into a small, hollow space at the base, partially hidden by undergrowth. "Now we wait," she whispered, drawing the boy close against the night's chill. Little Fox leaned against her, exhaustion finally overtaking his stoic composure. "Will the angry men hurt Father?" Sarah swallowed hard. "Your father is very clever and very fast, remember? And he knows these lands better than they do." The boy seemed to accept this answer, though Sarah herself found little comfort in the words. They settled into an uneasy vigil, every snapping twig or rustling leaf causing Sarah to tense in anticipation. Hours passed. Little Fox eventually drifted into fitful sleep against Sarah's shoulder, but she remained alert, straining her ears for any sound of approach. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten with the first hints of dawn when a shadow separated itself from the surrounding darkness. Sarah reached for the small derringer she'd brought, her heart hammering. "It's me." Swift Arrow's voice was barely audible as he approached, moving with deliberate slowness despite obvious pain. Even in the dim pre-dawn light, Sarah could see blood staining his left arm. "You're hurt," she gasped, relief at his appearance quickly giving way to concern. "Not badly." He knelt beside them, gently touching his sleeping son's head. "Ferguson and his men?" "We haven't seen them." Sarah gestured to his arm. "Let me look at that." Swift Arrow allowed her to examine the wound, a bullet graze that had torn through muscle but hadn't lodged in the arm. Using strips torn from her petticoat, Sarah bound it as best she could. "We cannot stay here," Swift Arrow said once she'd finished. "Ferguson will bring more men when daylight comes." "Where can we go?" Sarah asked. "They'll be watching the town, and they know about this place now." Swift Arrow's expression grew thoughtful. "There is one place, a trading post 3 days' ride north run by a man who was once married to a Cheyenne woman. He deals fairly with all people." 3 days? Sarah looked down at Little Fox, still sleeping. "The boy can't ride that far, and we have no horses." "I have horses," Swift Arrow replied, "hidden in a ravine not far from here." Sarah hesitated, reality crashing down upon her. "I can't just leave. My store. My life." "Your life in Willow Creek ended when you helped us," Swift Arrow said bluntly. "You know this." The truth of his words struck Sarah with painful clarity. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. Ferguson and those like him would never forgive what they saw as her betrayal. "What about your plan?" she asked quietly. "You wanted to find someone to care for Little Fox, to teach him about his mother's world." Swift Arrow's dark eyes held hers in the growing light. "That has not changed." Understanding dawned slowly. "You want me to come with you, to help raise your son?" It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "Yes." "Why me? Why did you come to my store that first day? You said you remembered me, but—" "I told you. I saw you the night of the raid." His voice softened. "I watched as they pulled you from the burning building. Later I learned who you were, what you had lost because of my people. When my wife died and my band rejected us, I thought of you. You sought me out deliberately," Sarah realized. "The medicine for Little Fox. He truly was sick," Swift Arrow assured her. "But yes, I came to you with purpose, to see if the kindness I remembered still lived in your eyes despite your loss." Sarah should have been angry at the revelation, but instead found herself oddly touched by his honesty. "And if I hadn't helped you, then I would have known you were not the one." He shrugged slightly. "But you did help, again and again. Little Fox stirred, waking to find his father beside them. His cry of delight pierced the dawn as he threw himself into Swift Arrow's arms, mindless of the injured limb. As father and son embraced, Sarah considered her options. Return to Willow Creek, face hostility and possibly violence for her betrayal? Try to start over alone in another town? Or accompany this man and boy on an uncertain journey, serving as bridge between two worlds for a child who belonged to both? The choice seemed impossible, yet somehow already made. "If I come with you," she said finally, "I need to know something first." Swift Arrow looked up, his son still cradled against him. "Ask. The raid that killed Thomas. Were you part of it?" His gaze remained steady. "No. My band was far north when it happened, but I came after, when I heard. I wanted to see what kind of men would be killed by such an attack." "Why?" "Because I was questioning the way of endless war. Because of Rebecca." He shifted Little Fox to his uninjured side. "She was teaching me that there must be another path." Sarah nodded slowly, believing him despite everything she had been raised to think about the Comanche. "One more thing," she said. "If I go with you, it will be as Little Fox's teacher, not as your woman." To her surprise, Swift Arrow smiled slightly. "I would expect nothing else. Trust must be earned, Sarah Jenkins. On both sides." By mid-morning, they were riding north. Sarah on a paint mare, Little Fox seated before his father on a sturdy Mustang. They traveled mostly in silence, each absorbed in private thoughts about the journey ahead. For Sarah, leaving behind everything she had known brought both grief and an unexpected sense of liberation. She had spent 3 years existing rather than living, going through motions without purpose beyond daily survival. Now, despite the dangers and uncertainties ahead, she felt truly alive again. On the evening of the third day, they crested a hill and saw smoke rising from a cluster of buildings nestled in a small valley below, the trading post Swift Arrow had described. As they approached, Sarah noticed it was larger than she expected, almost a small settlement with several cabins surrounding the main building. A tall man with graying hair stepped out onto the porch as they rode into the yard. He showed no surprise at their unusual grouping. "Swift Arrow," he greeted with a nod. "Been some time." "James Blackwood," Swift Arrow replied. "We seek shelter." The man called Blackwood studied them thoughtfully, his gaze lingering on Sarah. "Trouble following?" "Perhaps." Blackwood seemed to consider this, then nodded. "Got a cabin out back, empty since the Johansons moved on last month. Needs some work, but it'll keep the rain off." He looked directly at Sarah. "Ma'am, I don't ask folks' business here. Everyone's got a past they're running from or a future they're running to. Sometimes both." "Thank you," Sarah replied, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders at his simple acceptance. Later, as they settled into the small cabin, Sarah found herself standing in the doorway, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. Little Fox was already asleep on a pallet inside, exhausted from their journey. Swift Arrow joined her, his presence beside her no longer frightening but somehow comforting. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now we build something new," he replied. "Not Comanche, not white. Something between." Sarah thought about the unlikely path that had brought her here, from shopkeeper's wife to widow to fugitive, all leading to this moment of strange new beginning. "It won't be easy," she said. Swift Arrow's hand found hers, the touch tentative but warm. "Few worthwhile things are." Sarah didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her palm upward, letting their fingers intertwine, a gesture as meaningful as any words could be. Together they stood in the fading light, watching darkness settle over the land, while behind them Little Fox slept peacefully, no longer caught between worlds but the living bridge between them. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah realized that what had begun as an act of compassion for a child had transformed into something far more profound. In helping Little Fox, she had found her own way forward, beyond grief and anger to a place where healing could finally begin. "We should rest," Swift Arrow said eventually. "Tomorrow brings much work." Sarah nodded, allowing herself a small smile. "Tomorrow," she agreed, "and all the tomorrows after." It was not the future she had ever imagined for herself, but standing there with the vast sky above and this new family beside her, Sarah Jenkins felt, for the first time in 3 long years, that she had come home.